Hi students, I wanted to show you those shortcuts that I was talking about in the module. Once you've watched the video on how to properly mix paint and use your palette knife and palette and clean your brushes and what brushes are for what shapes, this whole project is going to be mostly flat brushes, a variety of them. Um, Flat brushes are for shapes and round are for lines. You might have a few little details in your designs that have lines, but you don't want to have a lot of patterns and linear stuff. This is a warm-up project to learn about some color systems and to create some successful designs that have balance, unity, repetition, overlap, off the edges, all the principles of design that you would learn in Art 22. We're going to reinforce those design principles, and sometimes people haven't had design, which is strange. Sometimes people take this in the wrong order. You can take Art 2 before Art 1, but it goes backwards in time. And this is kind of a similar thing. You can take design later, but design is all about lines, shapes, values, successful compositions, all kinds of balanced systems, like symmetry, asymmetry, radial, crystallographic grid. In that class we cover a lot of different black, white, and gray materials. We deal with the temperature and saturation of values as opposed to color. Usually there's one or two color projects at the end of a design class, and that's sort of a little scratching the surface of where we head with color theory. Every class with color generally starts with a wheel of some kind, and some organized systems of color. It's also a way to learn some terminology. While we're doing that, though, there's certain methods we can use in each project that are more efficient than others, and I want to be able to work with you step by step on each project so you can avoid common mistakes or not meet the parameters of the project or think you know what it's supposed to be but you do it wrong and then you have to redo it. And so I just want to kind of go over that stuff. And I really did try to pare down the materials as much as I could. I even cut the tube of paint of black in half because you won't be using it all that much. I cut out the monochromatic project and some other things that are really hard to explain, and there's so many others that can take its place, so you won't be using black that much. You have the option of using it in a lot of our future projects. In this particular case, there's going to be no black on the entire warm-up. No gray either. So everything on here is going to be just the 12 hues on the wheel. The 13th is the mud in the middle, the neutral, and then you have the option of adding white within your designs. Not plain white, but white mixed in with one of the colors in your designs. A lot of times people like to use purples and blues with a tiny bit of white to help let it shine through, especially because ultramarine blue is very transparent. So this is very systematic here, and before you even get anywhere near getting paint out, we want to have this thing completely ready to go. And I'll show you some stuff here. Now, I don't require artist tape in this setting because I have a drawer of artist tape in the classroom. I have a lot of things in the classroom that I wish I could just somehow subliminally retrieve and send to each of you. Also, carbon paper. Why would you buy a whole stack of carbon paper when I have carbon paper, tracing paper, warm-up stuff, sketch paper, just random things, that colored pencils, markers, the kinds of things you just accumulate in a classroom that you may or may not have at home. But instead, I believe I put masking tape because that's cheap. It's like a couple bucks, as opposed to painter's tape's like $4-ish. Artist tape, which is the ultimate for many reasons, is over $7, and you won't be, I mean, that's just silly. So if you use blue tape, you're going to put tape not around the wheel, but around these forms on the edge, if you want a little shortcut, because then you don't have to worry about painting outside the edges. So you would put tape here, 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 and on the other side. And if you want, you can put a little sliver in between. If you're, I believe it was 1 inch in between. If you do, if your tape is 1 inch, you can put it there too. If it's blue tape, you can just seal it down, and the way you do this so that the paint doesn't bleed under here is you place it right on the edge of the board, and you take the top fingernail of your index finger and rub, not the whole thing rub, because you don't want it to stick, but rub on the inside edge of where you're going to be painting. So if you go like this, then when you peel it off at the very end, you'll have a nice clean edge. Another thing is, don't even use tape. It's going to take longer, but it's good practice for hard edge painting. You're not going to be able to tape here anyway, so you're going to get practice there. So if you want that shortcut, you're just going to tape it all the way around. Now that's painter's tape, so it will peel, no problem. On all your projects, you can use this to make a border. It sits for a while though, so it can tear. That's why this tape is softer, it doesn't stick as much, but then that's why you have to go like that. Every tape has a different personality. The white tape is the stickiest, so you have to actually put it on your clothes, press down and lift off before you put it on there. It takes away just enough of the sticky that it won't tear your board when you're done. And then masking tape, same thing. Really stick it on your clothes. And know that if it tears a little, it's going to tear a little. And when you take it off, just go as slow as you possibly can. And hopefully that won't happen. Okay. It also prevents getting paint in other areas around the edges. Okay, so we have our color wheel and we have our 4 designs. The systems that we're going to be using are complementary, primary triad, analogous, and split complementary. They can be in any order, or you can do them just as I have them listed on there. They can also be horizontal or vertical. You can also do your wheel this way or that way. Actually, no, you can't do the wheel that way because the yellow, on your wheel, this is the biggest. The big ones are the ones. I couldn't find a wheel to print that. I could have just used the example, but anyway, just don't turn this that way because you're yellow. You can even write on here top, because the top of the wheel, the yellow is always on the top of the wheel on any wheel. Okay, so this is your Itten 12-point wheel. It has 3 primaries, 3 primaries, 3 secondaries, and 6 tertiaries. The tertiaries are all the hyphenated colors. You can make everything on the wheel just from your 3 primaries. And these systems are ways of organizing these wheels into more sophisticated palettes. One problem that people have is they tend to just randomly grab color. I mentioned this before, I think. They go for gaudy greens and gaudy pinks and gaudy blues that aren't really mixed in a natural way. They also use the whole palettes like a clown, like clowny. It's fine in certain circumstances, but we want to learn how to control it. It's like if you know how to play one piece on an instrument, and then all of a sudden you learn all these other nuanced subtleties, and it just brings your practice to more depth. And you'll have favorites and you'll have other ones you don't like, but it's just an exploring of these systems. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is take a pencil and label what these designs are. And it's helpful to write it down separately on a sheet of paper and have it nearby so you know what it is that you're making. So we're going to start labeling this now. When you label with pencil and then you try to paint over it with yellow or even yellow green, yellow orange, sometimes other ones, you can see through. You can see through the actual paint to the pencil, and then you can't erase it. So then you have to add more white, and it's like, no. So when we label, we're never going to label inside the shapes. You can also create, like I did this, printout. You can print out a wheel on the computer, print out 4 rectangles, and use this as what we call a thumbnail, planning ahead for your design. What we're going to do here is not fill in the wheel and then do our designs. We're going to simultaneously apply one color to all of them. When I fill in yellow, I'm going to travel over here, and anywhere I see a Y in my design, I'm going to fill it in. Now if it says yellow plus white, something you want to lighten, you won't do that one, because we don't want to get anything else but one pile on the palette, and really practice that mixing and nuancing of the paint into like a margarine consistency. So we're just going to figure out our plain yellows before we do anything else when we do the design. So first thing, we're going to label our wheel. And you have already measured this out because I did that video on the measurements. But this is your primary triad. And a colored pencil is great because you can make little notes and stuff with it, and you can do little thumbnails with it. But right now I'm gonna just go, okay, so you can do it on the inside or the outside. That's yellow. And you know, when you get to here, you can go either way. You can go blue or red, red or blue. One or the other, blue, red. That's my primary triad. So if I wanted to, just for fun, I could go like this. I'm not filling it in yet, but it's just kind of a reminder that this is my primary triad. You can even write primary triad. You know, it's a great way to start learning terminology that you can talk about when you're talking about your own work and others. Now in here we have the one that was slightly larger but not as small as those. Those are our secondaries. Secondary colors are purple, orange, and green. So we have orange, and you know, purple is also called violet. I'm just going to put violet. And then we have green. So those are the 2 triads, primary, secondary. One of those we're going to be using in one of these designs. Everything in between those are the tertiaries. So I'm going to write this more legibly. Okay, so we have primaries, secondaries, tertiaries. We have 3 primaries, 3 secondaries, and 6 tertiaries altogether. So now we'll go ahead and label this. This is yellow, orange, Y-O is easier, or if you can write it out, that's fine. Red, orange, red, red, violet, violet, blue, violet, blue, blue, green, green, and yellow, green. The color wheel is a value scale. The top of the wheel is the equivalent of light gray. If you were colorblind, you would see light gray going down all the way to dark gray. Not completely black, but close. Yellow isn't quite as light enough to read as white. Violet is slightly less dark than black. But this part of the wheel can act as a black. A lot of times if you want to make something darker, it's better to reach for a purple or a red or a blue rather than pure black. It's just, and it's also a way of giving body to black itself. Like if you have a background that's black and it feels kind of flat, just put a little color, mix in a little color in it, you get a nice richer, but it's still black, but it's got a little temperature to it, a little body to it. Okay, so we've labeled these, we know what these are, and now we're going to decide on these design systems. I'm going to write it down over here because I need this room over here. So my first design is going to be, it can go in any order again. I'll do analogous first. A-N-A-L-O-G-O-U-S. And you're going to label it here. But since it's taped down, you're going to label it on the tape. And you can even take notes on here if you have a tiny pencil. So like what it is three neighbors. Three neighbors. Or you can write it over here, whatever. So you have three side by side. Now these are literally three side by side. This one, this one, this one. They have to be literally together on the wheel. That gives you a lot of options. So it's really your call. So once you design your design, it may call for a different scheme than what you have thought about beforehand. So what we usually do is create all of our designs first and then decide where things are going to be. The next one is called complementary. Complements, it's ironic because they complement each other by being opposites. They're opposites, like purple and yellow, blue and orange. They feature themselves best in the presence of their opposite because they're the most glaring of them themselves. If you put green next to red, it looks like a brilliant green. But if you had green next to blue, it would look more subtle. So complements is a great way to get pop and drama in here. So complements, that'll give you 6 options. Opposites. Opposites means directly opposites. So I can go purple and yellow, I can go yellow, orange, and blue, violet, I can go orange and blue, I can go blue, green, and red, orange, I can go red and green, and yellow, green, and red, violet. The most common one is blue and orange. Most people go for that. The next common is red and green, and then I'd say the next one is yellow and purple. People don't generally do the tertiary ones, so it might be kind of fun to challenge yourself and do a little of that. And remember, you have the option of mixing white into any of these designs. You may not plan on that originally, but if it looks too dark or doesn't have enough range of value, you can always add a little white. But you want to plan as if you're going to do this system, and then you can adapt to it later. So I'm going to go vertical over here just because I am sitting like this. It's probably sideways from there, I don't know. Complements, analogous. Okay, then this we're going to do triad of primary colors. And as we did, this is it here. That's a very bold, dramatic, intense kind of a scheme, jumpy. So you have 3 colors. You can also add white again to any of them. Now, with each of these, you have a minimum area of space that has to be activated. Like for analogous, you might want to write down it's 3 colors, so you have to have 3 areas. That would be really simple, but you can in your head know that you have to have at least 3. Complements, you have to have at least 2 because there's 2. Triads, 3. Split complements are going to be 3 as well. This is split complementary. But you can have many sections and repeat colors and change the tints. Tints is adding white to a color, which is the only option we have on here. Shades is adding black, and tones is adding gray if you were doing a full monochromatic scheme. But we're not going to introduce black or gray into this paper. It'll just be more straightforward. Split complementary. So look at our triads. Blue, red, yellow right there. So again, like if you have a scratch paper, you can write on this, mark it up, sketch it out. A lot of people draw a design first on separate paper, the same size, 4x6, and then transfer it with a clean line with carbon paper to the board. People do that a lot. And if you don't have carbon, you would put, and I showed you, you go like this on the back of the paper and then flip it over. It's a little messy, but it's an alternative to drawing directly on the board. When you do doodle, try not to doodle the wrong shape. Like this is a rectangle, and what happens I see is people will doodle in a square and say, oh, you know, how does this look? Is this a good design? And I have to go, well, it's not going to fit there. You'd have to crop it to make it fit there. So either make a 2x3 thumbnail that you can double, or just make it 4x6 outright, because then it's exactly the same, and you can either visually copy it or transfer it. You don't even need to do the tracing paper step. You just take your little drawing, put it right here with the pencil wrapped on the back, drawing like filled, then place it and go over it with a pen, and it usually goes through pretty well. And since it's paint, we don't have to worry too much about carbon lines showing, but especially if it's pencil, but you don't want to see the line through. So sometimes people, even after they put the drawing on there, treat it with white, let it dry, and then start painting. Because white is pretty transparent enough, if you do a thin layer, that you can get rid of the texture of the illustration board and the paint adheres a little bit better. This project is a lot about learning good paint consistency and hard edge painting, which is crisp edges. It's a technique that all painters have to use, and designers. It involves a flat brush and using it in specific ways. I'm not sure yet if I did that demo with the hard brush, but I will. If I haven't, I'll look. So flat brushes are good for shapes and hard edges, and you're going to need to do several layers. Like, let's say I do yellow here, let it dry, come back to it. It only takes 5 minutes to dry, but I'd wait like 15. And then do another layer of it. And really good is to do another. Your projects will just look gorgeous if you do. You can always tell, even through the computer. I can tell if someone did one coat and it's kind of streaky or it's uneven in saturation. And then if someone else just goes over and over and over with the layers, you can tell, because the whole board has disappeared and you're only looking at the paint consistency. So that's our goal here. Usually this project comes out a little bit like not as solid, but do your best and see if you can get those layers. I'd love to see a group of work that all came out great on this project. Another thing that always gets wrong is the actual colors. I wrote on there, I emphasize so very much that to make yellow green, you would need a blob of yellow this big just to show the difference. If this were the blob of yellow, the amount of blue you'd have to put in it to make yellow green is this. I'm not kidding. And you never want to start with a different color and start adding yellow in. It ruins it. You'll go through your whole tube. It'll be gone. So yellow pile and then put a dot in and then mix to get your color. But we'll go through that step by step. It's harder to change the color wheel once it's on there, because then you have to let it dry, put white, let it dry, redo. And it's just better to get it right the first time on your palette. But we're not going to mix at this point. Okay, so split complementary is a color plus the two neighbors of its opposite, which gets a little confusing because you have 12 options. If I do violet with yellow, green, and yellow, orange, and I start swooping around all my options, I have 3 options for every color. Because yellow and red, violet and red could be with yellow, green. Violet and blue could be with yellow, orange. And violet can be with the 2 that I started with. So every color has 3 potentials. Instead of figuring that out, I made a list. I just made a list so that you can pick from the list. So in each one, analogous, I'm going to pick. Some people draw it first and then pick. I think I'll just pick. You can pick it later. I'm going to do yellow, green, yellow, and yellow, orange for my analogous. Primary triad, we're all doing red, blue, and yellow. Complements, I'm going to do blue, orange. And then split complements, I'm going to do the one that I had here, which is yellow, green, yellow, orange, and violet. And I may or may not add white to any of these. And if you plan ahead, the ones you want, like a light yellow, a lighter red that's sort of a pink, or a pale blue, then it's helpful to put all that in here. Okay, so example of a design, very simple but not too simple. Try not to be too representational. I've had people come in and do like an entire peacock feather display, or like a portrait, or like a land full of mushrooms that are this big, and by the time they paint this one thing in, it's like weeks have gone by. And we've got stuff to do that's more elaborate, I guess you could say. So don't go too crazy, but not too simple either so that it's too much. So I'll just do kind of an abstract shape. I don't think that doing something representational is always the best approach. And of course you can play with this first. It can also feel like something, but not be spelled out directly. And it can be something. Just try to consider the design principles, which are repetition, overlap. I'm going to do one small thing because it's good to have variety. I'm going to repeat this egg shape here. It creates some overlap. And this pointy shape seems a little bit isolated, so I'm going to do one more pointy type shape. In fact, I'll just do this as if that's pointy going in. Like that's pointy, you can't see, and then I'll do one more kind of pointy. That's fairly complex. Really it is. So try not to go much more evolved than that. Oh, and this is super cool. You can continue it into another design. There is a gap here, but you can do it. I've even had people do a quick line drawing of a still life of all three sides. So you can have the whole thing activated and engaged with each other. Or it could be completely separate. But I'm just kind of quickly, I want you to kind of see the complexity that we're going for. And you know, if it turns out to be something, great. But this project is more about, as most things in art, aren't about what it is. What it is whatever anything is. It's technique, it's craftsmanship, it's paint mixing, it's color schemes, it's evidence of training. That is what we're looking for in any kind of piece. Subject matter is useless if the technique is not strong in any work. So people always want to see, like, oh, it's a mountain, oh, it's a tree, oh, it's a... People love that. It makes them feel, I don't know, people like it. And you get it, realism is the most important thing to master when you draw and paint, but still, in this case, I'm just saying you don't have to have it look like something. It might end up looking like something inadvertently, but we're looking for places where there's awkward moments and where there's not. Awkward moments are when things hit the edge funny or they hit each other funny. And once your eye is trained and you look at something, you immediately know if something's off, and that needs to be fixed. So when you're finished with your designs, it's really helpful to send them to me or your classmates and have somebody else's eye look at it. Like, this looks weird to me. It just does. It feels uncomfortable. So it's just doesn't flow with everything else. But in this design process, I can start thinking about what I want to do in terms of color. I just want you to see, like, the level of complexity. This isn't like the best in the world, that's for sure. But I'm going to put one more thing here and erase this. I don't know if you can see that well. Let me look. You know what? It's not that visible. So I'm going to make it darker. You know, of course you're not going to do this with a marker, but I want to show you the technique here. So we're basically penciling out the design, and again, you don't have to have them all flow into each other. You could even have these two flow, these two, or these two. It's more about avoiding the pitfalls of design, which is something smack dab in the middle. Oh, that's a terrible thing. The most common mistake people make is they take a piece of picture plane, they stick something in the middle, and that's it. then the whole background is this random unrelated space. So if you ever end up with something that's like smack dab in the middle and nothing around it, add something else. Let it go off the edge. Break up the negative space. It's something I probably say a million times, is break up the negative space. Let it be part of the positive space. Let it be natural and full and contributing to the foreground, as opposed to completely random square. I mean, if it doesn't relate, it's just not helpful at all. You know, it doesn't have to be busy, crazy chaos, but you want to control the viewer's eye movement, not just have them get stuck in the middle where they have nowhere to go. It should be like a flow. So usually in this project, people are so consumed with the color they forget the design principles. So do keep that in mind. This kind of acts like a whole now, and this is sort of the focal point, almost like a balance area where it spreads out. So I don't think I'll do too much else. Anyway, I gotta just focus on the task at hand. All right, so you know how I said we're gonna label everything? A lot of people put little arrows and say, okay, that's gonna be yellow. Okay, that's gonna be yellow plus white. You can also put a clear paper on top or something where you can scratch on like that. Another thing you could do is every time you go to paint, take an eraser and erase each one. So let's say I had a yellow real light and I went to grab yellow, I could erase this and then fill it in. But another way is take tape, any kind of tape, I'll use the blue, and you can go like that, and then with a darker pen go, okay, yellow, that's yellow green, and then you can just take it off when you go to paint it. You'll find a way. I mean, if you have this scratch paper and it's measured on here, this is scratch paper. So if I were doing this before the board, I can make a mess. It doesn't matter. And the best part of the scratch paper is I can take those colored pencils and actually see kinda what my thing might look like. So I wanted to do yellow, green, yellow, and yellow, orange. And I'm planning yellow there, so where else would I put it? Because I can only use 3 colors, but I can use adding white to them. So this is where the design thing comes in again. Yellow, yellow, yellow would create a swerve of eye movement. 3 is a good number. 1 is not, 2 is 3 is nice. So now I have this eye movement that I've purposefully created with color. And that's more important than whatever it is, as long as the color supports the design. Remember, color is the last element of art, and it's supposed to support and navigate the surface along with lines and shapes and textures and values. So color not only creates psychological impact on a design, but it also creates energy and movement. So the placement is really important. If I left this guy out there stranded all by himself, yellow, without these, you get stuck. Like you're like nowhere to go. But this controls the viewer to come around here. So you have a lot of power in the way that you place things. If you run out of colors for that space, just add white to it. This is going to be my yellow orange. In this case, I'm using the top of the wheel. The top of the wheel is the lightest part of the value of the value scale. So you're not going to get a lot of pop in here. You can't add black, and besides, if you did, these would all turn into olives anyway. It's just the nature of the top of the wheel. So I'm not going to be able to get strong values there unless I pull out whites. So maybe here I'll do yellow, green, and then over here I'll fill it lighter and say yellow, green plus white. And then try to visualize where else I could put that to balance it. This should be yellow, green because it flows through here. It's kind of like the negative space. So yellow, green plus white. I'm going to put yellow, green plus white here. And you got to be careful they don't touch. You know what I mean? Like if I made this yellow green, it runs into this, you wouldn't even see it. So I have to add a lot of white to it here. And I'll just make a note. Then it will look different than this one. You can even press harder, like if this is yellow green. It's too dark for yellow green actually, but you can kind of get a sense. So yellow, green plus white. Too bad I don't have a yellow highlighter. I could see this would have to be much more yellow to be yellow green. So you can mix your pencils together just to do it. Even if you don't have all the colors, it just gives you an idea. So what's left? Yellow, orange. So I know I'll just do yellow, orange plus white, and yellow, orange again. Boom, I'm done with that. Okay. Now I'm doing complements. Let's say I do orange and blue, orange, 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 blue. Boom, that one's done. I might add white. No, I think because I want. Oh, maybe I'll add right here, blue. I don't know, blue plus white. See, you can do different amounts of white. You can do super, super light blue, super, super medium light blue. So it's that way. All right, so how can I describe this? I'm going to put, for my triads, I'm going to do blue in the back. And then I'm going to do red and red, because I have to use yellow. And I feel like I need yellow somewhere else. So I might change my design a little here to put, let's see what I want to do here. I feel like I need to balance this and maybe have a little point here to bring that through. You know, it's just kind of like plan it out. Okay, so now let's say you're on your board and you're about to paint and you're gonna go and do this. You're gonna pick one primary only to put on the palette. Blue, red, or yellow. That's it. You're gonna mix your pile of blue, mix your big pile of blue, and you're gonna take your blue and go over here and fill in your blue. Then with the paint. Then you scan this area and look for any other blues and you fill those. So you could spend like an hour or more just filling your blues really nicely. And if it's too dark of a blue, you might want to add white now. You might change it a little now that your plan didn't involve such a dark value or whatever. I'll do split complementary with blue, red, orange, and yellow, orange. Because that's the colors of one of the split comps. And you might want to consider, if you're flowing one into the other, how those colors are going to hit. Do you want it to look like one united force? If you do, you could strategically pick color schemes that flow into other color schemes that have the same color. So I had someone do that last time. They had a blue here, and then this bled into this visually, and then it was like a solid. Like if you had blue here, it could continue here if both of these particular systems appropriately had those colors. So you do all your blues. Don't get white, don't get anything else out. Then you're going to switch to clean everything up completely. New water, everything. Then we're going to fill in red. Pick another primary. This is not what it's going to look like, but you know. Then we scan over here. Sometimes you don't even have that color in any of your designs, but we all will have the primaries because we're all doing the triad one. So I fill that in. Sometimes that'll be it. That's it. But I'm still not doing any mixing because I'm only doing the primary. So then I'm going to go like this, fill in all my yellows. Then we're going to start mixing. And even then, when you mix your yellow-orange, get a pile of it, get substantial enough, put it over here. Don't deal with the whites yet. Then mix your orange, should be like a real pumpkin, light orange. And then so on. But I wanted to show you that. I know it was very long, but that way you know how to set it up. And this is a great way to plan it out. Even if you don't have colored pencils, just to have scratch paper for the design. Okay.